8. Randy Lee Cooper and Kristen Nicole Begu. During the summer of 2020, police officers from Newburgh, Dundee, Oregon had to chase down a Toyota Land Cruiser that had recently been reported stolen. They first spotted the vehicle driving around in the downtown area and pursued it for a few blocks as the driver tried to elude law enforcement. Thankfully, he didn't get very far before he crashed into a Buick Regal, which ironically had also allegedly been stolen. And without even trying to do so, the police were able to kill two birds with one stone, figuratively speaking, of course. The driver of the Land Cruiser, identified by the authorities as 27-year-old Randy Lee Cooper of Portland, was charged with a slew of crimes, including 1 count each of third-degree assault, fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer, reckless driving, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Police officers also identified the driver of the Buick, which had been reported stolen 3 weeks prior, as 25-year-old Kristen Nicole Begu. She received her own set of charges, which included driving under the influence of intoxicants and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Both suspects were released after their arrest, and the outcomes of their cases are now unclear. 7. Sean Crawshaw. In early 2017, an elderly homeowner in Manchester, England, came home from shopping one day and found an intruder stuck inside her bathroom's window. He was perched about 15 feet above the ground and needed help getting down. Emergency responders had to be called in to get the criminal out. 47-year-old Sean Crawshaw was allegedly trying to sneak into the senior citizen's house when he got himself stranded. It took firefighters a whole 20 minutes to free him from his tricky position, which left him with a minor ear injury. The crew didn't hesitate to snap a few pictures of the suspect as they helped him out of the embarrassing predicament. After being rescued by law enforcement, Crawshaw was promptly arrested for the botched burglary. Greater Manchester Police Sergeant Richard Garland was quick to throw a little humor into his interview with the BBC, stating it was nice of him to hang around. On a more serious note though, he said that the homeowner was left shaken by the unwelcome intrusion. Crawshaw pleaded guilty to burglary with the intent to steal and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. 6. Calvin Wilson. In 2001, while renovating the chimney of a historic building in Natchez, Mississippi, a team of brick masons uncovered a fully clothed human skeleton. The remains were obviously unidentifiable to the naked eye, but the deceased person's wallet held pay stubs belonging to a Louisiana man named Calvin Wilson. He'd actually gone missing 15 years earlier, in 1985. Jewelry found on the remains also indicated that the bones most likely belonged to the long-missing man as well. About a year after Wilson vanished at the age of 27, bones were found along the banks of the Mississippi River. Authorities thought they may have belonged to Wilson, and his family had no reason to suspect otherwise. They were shocked by the discovery of his body inside the chimney over a decade later, especially since they thought they'd laid Wilson to rest and said their goodbyes. When the first set of remains was located in 1986, DNA technology was still in its infancy. Genetic testing wasn't widely available, leaving law enforcement to rely on other means of identifying bodies. But the technology had come a long way by the time Wilson's skeleton was discovered, and samples were taken from both sets of bones to be sent for DNA testing. Given the circumstances that Wilson's remains were spotted in, police concluded that he was probably trying to shimmy down the 2-story chimney with plans to rob the building, which housed a gift store at the time of his attempted break-in. He had a long history of burglary, and there aren't many other reasons for trying to sneak into a closed-off building through its chimney. Wilson most likely got stuck inside as the vertical passageway narrowed and was unable to call out for help, leaving him to suffer a slow, lonely death. At the time, the chimney wasn't in use and the flue was completely sealed off, effectively concealing any possible odor of decomposition. 5. Julian Aham Neers. If you're going to give the cops a reason to pull you over, it's probably a good idea to make sure there's nothing illegal in plain sight or in your car, period. This is exactly what 22-year-old Julian Ahamnes was trying to do in 2016 when he allegedly ate his whole weed supply to avoid getting caught with it during a traffic stop that took place in New Braunfels, Texas. The young man was handed several traffic citations for having a broken headlight and license plate light and was arrested for a speeding warrant. While interacting with Ahamnes, the police officer noticed a strange smell of marijuana on his breath. He asked Julian to open his mouth wide and immediately noticed scraps of marijuana leaves on his teeth and tongue, which was tinted slightly green. It was enough probable cause to search through Ahamnes' vehicle, but the officer only discovered a few tiny crumbs of weed, along with a cup that looked like it had been used as an ashtray at some point. There wasn't enough pot at the scene to charge Ahamnes with possession, and the arresting officer had a hunch why. Ahamnes was hit with one felony count of tampering with or fabricating evidence for allegedly consuming his weed, along with the speeding warrant he was wanted on and the traffic citations he received that day. He was eventually released on $7,000 bond, pending the outcome of the case. Sadly, news outlets failed to follow up on the case, but Julian's name hasn't reappeared in any major news articles since this incident, which suggests that he dealt with his legal issues and put the situation behind him. 4. Juanita Marie Jones. In August 2007, 53-year-old Juanita Marie Jones was disappointed after discovering that she paid $20 for a fake crack rock from an unnamed drug dealer in Rochelle, Georgia. She knew she'd been ripped off when she didn't feel high after breaking the rock up into 3 tiny pieces and smoking one of them. Typically, when you buy a faulty product from a store, you can return it, and in some cases you can even sue or file criminal charges against whoever sold you the broken item. But this isn't exactly how things work when it comes to illegal goods like street drugs. Jones nevertheless called the police and said she wanted help getting her money back after buying the fake crack. She even showed the drugs to a deputy and an officer who paid her a visit, and while the crack may not have been up to her high standards, it was plenty real enough for law enforcement to arrest her on suspicion of drug possession. The outcome of the case is currently unclear, but it wasn't a very serious charge in the first place. It's probably safe to assume that Jones squared away her legal matters and moved on with her life. One can only hope that she found some healthier, legal hobbies. 3. Fleeing bank robber stops to buy smokes. A high-speed police chase isn't really the type of situation where you can hit the pause button and go take care of another errand. But that's just what one Phoenix man tried to do after robbing a bank in July 2007. According to police officers, the suspect went into a Bank of America branch at around 10 o'clock a.m. and quietly handed a demand note to a teller. He left with an undisclosed amount of cash in his pockets and was seen getting into a pickup truck. An employee wrote down the license plate number on the vehicle, and investigators were able to launch a stakeout near the man's residence. Law enforcement tried to corner the suspect as he left his home with a woman, but the pair managed to get into the white pickup truck before officers could grab them. The driver then shifted the truck into reverse and backed straight into an unmarked police cruiser before driving away quickly. A chase then began for the next few minutes before the male suspect dropped the woman back off at the property they'd just left. By then, the police had a helicopter up in the air, tracking the man's every movement. As he continued to elude authorities, the accused bank robber pulled into a convenience store parking lot and went into the business with a $20 bill. He handed the money over to the cashier and demanded a pack of cigarettes in return. The suspect even asked for his change and waited several moments before seeing a police car outside and leaving the store without the money he was owed. By then, law enforcement was gaining on him, and the pursuit lasted for only a few more minutes before the man ran over some stop sticks the police placed in the road to pop his tires. He was then taken into custody on suspicion of bank robbery and multiple other crimes, but his identity was never publicly revealed, and the outcome of the case is still a mystery. 2. Christian Barla. In 2000, a Polish small business owner named Dariusz Januszewski was discovered dead in a lake in the city of Wrocław after being reported missing 4 weeks before. His hands were tied up behind his back, and he seemed to have been tied up in an extremely uncomfortable backward cradle position, which gets tighter as the person pulls on the ropes to free themselves. Januszewski's body showed signs of torture and starvation, and a medical examiner concluded that he'd most likely drowned after being thrown into the water. The case went unsolved for 3 years as law enforcement poured countless amounts of time, manpower, and resources into the investigation. Their first big break came from an unexpected source years later in 2003, when Polish author Krystian Bala published a book called Amok. The story is about an unsolved murder that had suspicious similarities to the circumstances surrounding Januszewski's death. It caught the attention of a cold case detective named Jack Wroblewski, who brought new attention to the case. Wroblewski read Bala's novel multiple times, only becoming more certain with each repetition that the author was responsible for Januszewski's death. The evidence against Bala only grew as the investigation unfolded. Investigators realized that Bala called Januszewski the day he went missing and later sold the victim's cell phone online. They also learned that Bala suspected that his estranged wife and Januszewski were having an affair. In fact, Januszewski seemed to have a lot of things Bala wanted. He was a successful businessman who ran a small advertising agency, while Bala struggled just to make ends meet and lacked any business savvy whatsoever. Bala even filed for bankruptcy the same year Januszewski was murdered, by which point his marriage was in ruins. Prosecutors soon accused Bala of kidnapping Januszewski from his office and killing the victim out of jealousy. They claimed that the suspect confessed to the murder during questioning, but that he later took back his statement. Bala argued in court that his confession was forced out of him. He denied involvement in the crime and claimed that he wrote Amok based on information he learned from news articles. But the novel had details only Januszewski's killer would have known at the time, so this explanation didn't make sense. It also held other uncanny similarities that were impossible to ignore. Much like Januszewski, the murder victim in the novel owned a small advertising agency. He was also bound and tortured before being thrown into a body of water. In 2007, Bala was found guilty of planning and directing Januszewski's murder, but the court ruled that there wasn't enough evidence to fully convict him of carrying out the crime. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but won a retrial the next year. Bala was once again found guilty of masterminding the murder and was ordered to keep serving his original 25-year sentence. 1. Poison Umbrella Plot. Nicknamed Dr. Death, Dr. Wouter Basson led a chemical and biological weapons program that mainly targeted South Africa's black population during the country's apartheid era. In 2000, he went on trial for criminal allegations stemming from his past. Specifically, Basson was accused of giving lethal drugs to people who killed hundreds of prisoners of war during the 1980s. During the trial, a witness named Trevor Floyd described a plot to kill exiled anti-apartheid officials from the African National Congress Party, who lived in London back in 1986 and 1987. The plan apparently called for the assassination of South African Member of Parliament Pallo Jordan and the country's Minister of Water Affairs and Forestry, Ronnie Kasrils. According to Floyd, a former member of the now-defunct Civil Cooperation Bureau's death squad, the weapon for carrying out the hits would have been an umbrella that shoots poison darts. To stop the device from being traced to South Africa, Floyd got an umbrella from Europe and traveled to England to pick it up after it had been modified into a lethal weapon. The poison was allegedly provided by Dr. Basson. There were a few problems with the umbrella. While showing Floyd how to use it, a CCB member got some poison on his finger. Floyd told the court during Basson's trial that he thought the man was going to die, but that he felt fine after just 10 minutes. While traveling with the umbrella, Floyd noticed it was very long and prone to tapping the ground, prematurely shooting its poison darts. Floyd then discovered that one of the two intended victims had moved out of London, while the other was never home. The assassination plot was then abandoned and the weapon was discarded into the Thames River. It's definitely a good thing that the killings were never conducted, and the problematic nature of the plan from day one proved that the idea was not nearly as sophisticated as its masterminds hoped it would be. Thanks for watching. Would you rather come home and find an intruder taking a nap on your couch, or be pulled over and screamed at by police officers during a case of mistaken identity? Let us know in the comments below.